Commander Jake Harrison sat in his captain's chair aboard the UHS Discovery, watching the stars drift past the main view screen. The ship hummed quietly around him as it moved through the dark emptiness of space. 3 years had passed since he took command of this exploration vessel, and most days were exactly like this one: quiet, peaceful, sometimes boring. The Discovery was not the largest ship in the human fleet, but it was fast and well-equipped for long-range missions. Jake's crew of 42 men and women had been patrolling the outer edges of human space for 6 months now. They checked on remote colonies, mapped new star systems, and watched for any signs of trouble. It was important work, but it rarely provided much excitement. Jake stretched in his seat and looked around the bridge. Lieutenant Amy Foster sat at the communications station, her fingers dancing across the control panel as she monitored dozens of different frequencies. Dr. Carl Bennett was hunched over the science console, studying readings from a nearby nebula. Captain Lisa Morgan stood near the tactical display, reviewing patrol routes for the next week. Chief Engineer Pete Collins had gone down to the engine room an hour ago to check on some minor repairs. The routine was comfortable, but Jake sometimes wondered if they would ever encounter anything truly interesting out here. The galaxy was a big place, and humans had only been exploring it for about 50 years. They had met a few other species during that time, but contact had been limited. Most aliens seemed to prefer keeping to themselves. Amy suddenly straightened in her chair. "Commander, I'm picking up something unusual on the long-range sensors." Jake turned toward her. "What kind of something?" "It's a transmission, sir. Very faint, but definitely artificial. The signal pattern is unlike anything in our databases." Dr. Bennett looked up from his console. "Where is it coming from?" Amy worked her controls for a moment before answering. "The signal originates from grid reference 774 Mark 8-2. That's in the Helix Nebula region." Jake frowned. The Helix Nebula was known to be dangerous. 3 collapsed stars in that area created gravitational fields so complex that most ships avoided the region entirely. Space around those dead stars twisted and pulled in ways that could tear apart even the strongest vessels. "Are you certain about the location?" Jake asked. "Yes, sir. The signal is definitely coming from inside the gravitational anomaly zone." "Lisa." Morgan walked over to stand beside Jake's chair. "Commander, no one goes into that area. It's been marked as hazardous for navigation since we first mapped it 15 years ago." Jake nodded. He knew the reputation of the Helix Nebula. Ships that ventured too close to the collapsed stars were rarely seen again. The gravitational forces there could trap a vessel and slowly crush it, or fling it away at impossible speeds. Either way, the result was usually the same. "Can you clean up the signal?" Jake asked Amy. "I'm trying, sir. The interference from the gravitational fields is making it difficult." Amy adjusted her controls and put the transmission through the main speakers. Static filled the bridge, broken by occasional bursts of what sounded like organized noise. Dr. Bennett left his station and moved to help Amy. "Let me try running it through the Universal Translation Matrix. Even if we can't understand the language, we might be able to identify patterns." The 2 officers worked together for several minutes while Jake waited. The static continued to crackle from the speakers, sometimes forming what almost sounded like words or sentences. Finally, Amy looked up with excitement in her eyes. "Commander, I think this is a distress call." Jake felt his pulse quicken. "You're sure?" "The mathematical patterns match standard emergency broadcast protocols. Whoever sent this is asking for help." Dr. Bennett nodded in agreement. "The signal repeats every 3 minutes and 14 seconds. It includes coordinate data and what appears to be status information about multiple vessels." "Multiple vessels?" Lisa asked. "At least 50 distinct identifier codes are embedded in the transmission," Bennett replied. "This isn't just one ship. In trouble. It's an entire fleet. Jake stared at the view screen while he considered this information. An alien fleet trapped in the most dangerous region of local space, calling for help. Every instinct told him to be careful. Humans had learned that not all species in the galaxy were friendly. Some were actively hostile, but the distress signal changed everything. Human space doctrine was clear on this point. Any ship or fleet sending an emergency transmission would receive assistance, regardless of who they were or where they came from. It was a principle that had guided human exploration since the early days of space travel. How long would it take US to reach their position? Jake asked. Pete Collins had returned to the bridge during the discussion. At maximum safe speed, about 18 hours, Commander. But I have to warn you, getting close to those collapsed stars is extremely risky. The gravitational shear could damage our hull integrity. What about our shields? They'll help, but they weren't designed for that kind of sustained gravitational stress. The forces in that region are beyond anything we've encountered before. Lisa crossed her arms. Commander, we should consider calling for backup. If there really is an alien fleet in trouble, they might have weapons and technology far beyond our capabilities. This could be dangerous. Jake understood her concerns, but he also knew that calling for backup would take weeks. The nearest human fleet was patrolling systems over a month away at full speed. If these aliens were really in distress, they might not survive that long. Amy, can you determine how urgent their situation is? Amy worked with the translation matrix for a few more minutes before answering. Based on the signal strength and repetition patterns, I believe they're in immediate danger. The transmission suggests their situation is getting worse with each passing hour. Dr. Bennett added his analysis. The gravitational forces in that region would gradually pull any trapped vessels toward the center. Once they pass a certain point, escape becomes impossible. Jake made his decision. Pete, plot a course for the Helix Nebula. Maximum safe speed. Aye, sir. Lisa stepped closer to Jake. Commander, are you certain about this? We're risking our ship and crew for aliens we know nothing about. That's exactly why we have to help them, Jake replied. When humans first started exploring space, we hoped that if we ever found ourselves in trouble, someone would come to our aid. We can't expect that kind of assistance if we're not willing to provide it ourselves. Dr. Bennett returned to his station to begin long-range scans of their destination. Amy continued working on the alien transmission, trying to extract more information. Pete Collins went back to the engine room to prepare for the dangerous journey ahead. As the Discovery changed course toward the Helix Nebula, Jake wondered what they would find when they arrived. The alien fleet could be friendly, explorers like themselves, or they could be something far more dangerous. Their technology was obviously advanced enough for long-range space travel, which meant they might have weapons that could easily destroy a single human ship. But Jake had made the right choice, and he knew it. Helping others in distress was what separated civilized beings from simple predators. If humanity wanted to be respected in the galaxy, they had to prove they deserved that respect. The stars ahead grew brighter as the Discovery increased speed toward its destination. In less than a day, they would discover what kind of aliens were trapped in the gravitational maze of the Helix Nebula. Jake hoped they would be grateful for human assistance. He also hoped his crew would survive the encounter. The Discovery shuddered as it entered the outer edge of the Helix Nebula's gravitational field. Jake gripped the arms of his captain's chair as the ship's hull groaned under the stress. Warning lights flashed across the bridge, and the steady hum of the engines changed to a more strained sound. Hull integrity holding at 92%, Pete Collins reported from the engineering station. But I'm reading stress fractures starting to form along the outer plating. Reduce speed by 20%, Jake ordered. We won't help anyone if we tear ourselves apart getting there. Through the main view screen, Jake could see the twisted space ahead of them. The light from distant stars bent and curved in impossible ways. 3 collapsed stars, each one dense beyond imagination, pulled at everything around them with invisible hands. Space itself seemed to ripple and flow like water. "Contact," Amy Foster called out suddenly. "I'm picking up multiple ships ahead. The sensor readings are incredible, Commander." Dr. Bennett looked up from his science console with amazement on his face. "One count 53 vessels. Some of them are larger than anything we've ever built. The biggest one is over 2 kilometers long." Jake felt his mouth go dry. Human ships were measured in hundreds of meters, not kilometers. Whatever species they were about to meet clearly had technology far beyond anything humans possessed. "Are they responding to our signals?" Jake asked. Amy worked her controls for several minutes before answering. "Yes, sir. I'm getting a response. On multiple frequencies. They're trying to establish communication." The main speakers crackled with static, then slowly cleared to reveal a deep, resonant voice speaking in an unknown language. The words were harsh and commanding, with sounds that human throats could never produce. "Can you translate it?" Jake asked. Amy and Dr. Bennett worked together, feeding the alien speech through their computer systems. The universal translation. Matrix struggled with the unfamiliar language patterns, but slowly began to produce results. "I think I have it," Amy said. "The transmission is coming from their command ship. They're identifying themselves as the Corvani Imperial Navy." The alien voice continued speaking, and Amy translated as best she could. "They're demanding to know who we are and why we're here. The speaker identifies himself as Admiral HFY, commander of the 7th Fleet." Jake straightened in his chair. An admiral commanding 50 ships meant this was no simple exploration mission. This was a major military force, possibly more powerful than the entire human space fleet combined. "Open a channel," Jake ordered. "Let me speak to him directly." Amy nodded and activated the communication system. "Channel open, sir." "Admiral HFY, this is Commander Jake Harrison of the human vessel Discovery. We received your distress signal and came to offer assistance." There was a long pause before the alien responded. When Admiral HFY's voice came through the speakers again, Amy translated his words with obvious difficulty. "He says he doesn't understand. He's asking what humans are, and why we would respond to their transmission. He seems surprised that anyone came." Jake chose his words carefully. "Tell him that humans are a spacefaring species from this region of the galaxy. We have a policy of responding to all distress signals, regardless of who sends them." Amy relayed the message, and again there was a long pause. When the Admiral replied, his tone seemed different, less commanding, more curious. "He's asking about our capabilities," Amy translated. "He wants to know if we have the technology to help them escape the gravitational field." Dr. Bennett shook his head. "Commander, their ships are far more advanced than ours. If they can't break free with their technology, I don't see how we could." "Help." Jake understood Bennett's concern, but he wasn't ready to give up. Amy asked the Admiral to explain their situation. What exactly is keeping them trapped? The conversation continued for several minutes, with Amy translating back and forth. Gradually, the full scope of the aliens' problem became clear. Admiral HFY explained that his fleet had been pursuing rebel forces when they were lured into the gravitational trap. The Corvani ships were designed for combat, with powerful weapons and strong shields, but their systems couldn't handle the constant pull of the collapsed stars. Their engines are designed for short bursts of high speed, Dr. Bennett explained after hearing the details. They're not built for the sustained thrust needed to escape this kind of gravitational field. Every time they try to break free, they drain their power reserves and make their situation worse. Lisa Morgan stepped forward. "What about their shields? Can't they protect the ships?" "The shields work against energy weapons and debris," Bennett replied, "but they're useless against gravitational forces. The collapsed stars are literally pulling their ships apart at the molecular level. Jake studied the tactical display that showed the positions of all the alien vessels. Most were clustered together in the outer part of the gravitational field, but several had already been pulled deeper toward the center. The largest ship, presumably Admiral HFY's flagship, was dangerously close to the point of no return. "How long do they have?" Jake asked. Bennett ran calculations on his console. "Based on their current positions and the strength of the gravitational field, I'd estimate between 6 and 18 hours before the first ships are pulled past the event horizon. After that, nothing can save them." Jake felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. 53 alien ships, each one probably carrying hundreds of thousands of crew members, would be lost unless someone found a solution. The Corvani had superior technology, but it was the wrong kind of technology for this situation. Amy asked Admiral HFY if he would be willing to share technical specifications for his ships. "We might be able to find a solution they haven't considered." The request clearly surprised the alien commander. Amy translated his response with some difficulty. "He's asking why we would help them when we gain nothing from it. He says the Corvani have never encountered a species that offers aid without expecting something in return. Tell him that humans believe helping others is the right thing to do. We don't need a reward for doing what's right." Admiral HFY's reply was longer this time, and Amy had to ask for clarification several times before she could translate it properly. "He says our attitude is interesting but impractical. He's willing to share basic technical data, but he doubts our primitive technology can solve a problem that Corvani science cannot." Jake felt a flash of irritation at being called primitive, but he pushed the feeling aside. The Admiral was probably right about human technology being less advanced. But sometimes a different perspective could find solutions that others missed. "Dr. Bennett, work with their technical data and see what you can come up with. Lisa, I want you to study their ship positions and movements. Look for patterns or opportunities." Both officers nodded and got to work. Jake watched the main view screen as the alien fleet slowly drifted deeper into the gravitational field. Time was running out, and he still had no idea how to help them. "Commander," Amy said suddenly, "Admiral HFY is asking about our ship's capabilities. He wants to know how we're able to maintain position in the gravitational field when his ships cannot." Jake looked around the bridge. The Discovery was indeed holding steady, despite being much smaller than the alien vessels. "Pete, how are we managing that?" Collins checked his readings. "Our engines are designed for efficiency rather than raw power, sir. We're not fighting the gravitational field directly. Instead, we're using small course corrections to ride the currents, like a boat navigating a river." "Interesting," Dr. Bennett said, looking up from the technical data he was studying. "The Corvani ships are trying to overpower the gravitational field with brute force. They're not adapting to the changing conditions." Jake felt the first stirring of an idea. Maybe their primitive technology wasn't such a disadvantage after all. Sometimes the simple solution was the best solution. "Amy, tell Admiral HFY that. We might have a way to help his fleet, but we'll need his cooperation and trust." The alien commander's response was immediate and skeptical. Amy translated with a slight smile. "He says he'll listen to our proposal, but he doubts that humans can succeed where the mighty Corvani have failed." Jake smiled back. Admiral HFY was about to learn that sometimes being mighty wasn't enough. Sometimes you needed to be clever instead. Jake stood behind Dr. Bennett as the scientist worked with the Corvani technical data. The alien ship specifications filled multiple screens, showing designs that were both beautiful and deadly. Each vessel was a masterpiece of engineering, built for speed and combat effectiveness. "Their technology is amazing," Bennett said, pointing at various displays. "Look at these power systems. A single Corvani destroyer generates more energy than our entire fleet combined. But they're still trapped. Lisa Morgan observed from her position at the tactical station. All that power isn't helping them now. Bennett nodded thoughtfully. That's exactly the problem. Their ships are designed like racing cars. Incredible performance in ideal conditions, but not very adaptable when conditions change. Amy Foster looked up from her communications panel. Commander, Admiral HFY is asking for our proposed solution. He says his ships are being pulled deeper into the field, and time is running short. Jake moved to the center of the bridge, organizing his thoughts. The idea that had been forming in his mind was simple, but he wasn't sure the proud Corvani commander would accept it. Tell the Admiral that we want to try a coordinated rescue using our tractor beam technology, Jake said. We'll work together to pull his ships free one at a time. Amy relayed the message, then translated the Admiral's response. He's asking about our tractor beam specifications. He wants to know how powerful our systems are. Dr. Bennett winced. Our tractor beams are designed for moving cargo containers and small debris. Compared to Corvani technology, they're probably laughably weak. Given the specifications anyway, Jake ordered. There was a long pause after Amy transmitted the data. When Admiral HFY finally responded, his tone was clearly dismissive. Amy translated with obvious reluctance. He says our tractor beams are indeed primitive by Corvani standards. He doesn't understand how such weak systems could accomplish what their powerful engines cannot. Jake had expected this reaction. Amy, ask the Admiral if we can speak with his chief scientist. Sometimes scientists understand possibilities that military commanders miss. The request seemed to surprise Admiral HFY, but after a brief discussion, a new voice came over the communication system. The speaker was female, with a softer tone than the Admiral's harsh commands. This is Chief Scientist Veltara, Amy translated. She's willing to discuss technical solutions. Dr. Bennett moved closer to the communication panel. Commander, may I speak with her directly, scientist to scientist? Jake nodded, and Bennett began explaining the human rescue plan. Unlike Admiral HFY, Veltara listened without interrupting. She asked detailed questions about human tractor beam technology, ship maneuverability, and coordination protocols. She's interested, Amy reported after several minutes of technical discussion. She says the Corvani have been trying to escape using individual ship efforts. They haven't considered a coordinated approach using multiple vessels. Why not? Jake asked. Bennett relayed the question, then translated Veltara's response. She says Corvani military doctrine emphasizes individual ship superiority. Their commanders are trained to solve problems independently, not to work together on complex maneuvers. Lisa Morgan shook her head in amazement. They have 53 ships, but they're all acting alone instead of working as a team. It gets worse, Bennett continued as he listened to more of Veltara's explanation. Their command structure is so rigid that lower-ranking captains can't make suggestions to their superiors. Only Admiral HFY can approve new tactics, and he's focused on conventional military solutions. Jake realized they were dealing with more than just a technical problem. The Corvani were trapped by their own culture as much as by the gravitational field. Can Veltara convince the Admiral to try our approach? Jake asked. Amy translated the question, and Veltara's response was lengthy and animated. Finally, Amy provided a summary. She says she can present the technical case, but the Admiral is proud and suspicious of outside assistance. She suggests we demonstrate our method on a small scale first. What does she have in mind? There are 3 Corvani scout ships on the outer edge of the gravitational field. They're small and less valuable than the main fleet. If we can rescue them successfully, it might convince Admiral HFY to trust us with the larger vessels. Jake looked around his bridge crew. Pete Collins had joined them from the engine room, and was studying the tactical display. The 3 scout ships were indeed a less dangerous position, but they were still trapped and slowly being pulled deeper. "What do you think, Pete? Can we do it?" Collins examined the data carefully before answering. "It won't be easy, sir. We'll need to coordinate our tractor beam with very precise maneuvering. If we make a mistake, we could pull the scout ships deeper into the field instead of freeing them." "I can handle the navigation calculations," offered Lieutenant Sam Parker, the Discovery's navigator. "Give me 10 minutes with the gravitational data, and I can plot approach vectors for each rescue." Jake made his decision. "Do it. Amy, tell Veltara we'll attempt to rescue the 3 scout ships. Ask her to monitor our progress and relay the technical details to Admiral HFY." The next hour was tense as the Discovery maneuvered into position for the first rescue attempt. The scout ship was about the size of a human destroyer, but it was helplessly caught in the gravitational currents. Its Corvani crew had been trying unsuccessfully to break free for hours. "Approach in optimal position," Sam Parker reported from the navigation station. "Gravitational shear is within acceptable limits. Tractor beam ready." Pete Collins announced from engineering. Jake watched the main view screen as the Discovery slowly approached the trapped scout ship. The Corvani vessel looked elegant and deadly, with smooth curves and weapon ports along its hull. But its engines were dark, and it tumbled slowly in the invisible grip of the collapsed stars. "Initiating tractor beam contact," Collins said. Discovery shuddered slightly as its tractor beam locked onto the alien ship. Warning lights flashed as the ship's power system strained under the load. "Contact established," Collins reported. "Beginning extraction sequence." What happened next required perfect timing and coordination. Instead of trying to pull the scout ship straight out of the gravitational field, the Discovery used a series of gentle tugs combined with course corrections. Like a skilled pilot navigating dangerous rapids, Sam Parker guided both ships through the shifting currents of twisted space. "It's working," Dr. Bennett announced from his sensor station. "The scout ship is following our lead." For 20 minutes, the 2 vessels danced through the gravitational maze. The Discovery would pull gently, then pause to let the currents help move the scout ship into a better position. Gradually, they worked their way toward the edge of the field where the gravitational forces were weaker. "We're clear," Sam Parker finally announced. "Both ships are in stable space." A cheer went up from the Discovery's bridge crew. Jake felt a surge of satisfaction as he watched the rescued Corvani scout ship regain power and control. Its engines flared to life, and it took position alongside the Discovery. "Incoming message from the scout ship," Amy reported. "The captain is expressing gratitude for the rescue. He says he's never seen such precise ship handling." "What about Admiral HFY?" Jake asked. Amy worked her controls, then smiled. "Veltara is reporting that the Admiral watched the entire rescue. He's impressed but wants to see if we can repeat the success with the other 2 scout ships." Jake looked at his tired but determined crew. "Can we do it?" Pete Collins checked his engineering displays. "The tractor beam systems are running. Hot, but they're holding. We can manage 2 more rescues if we're careful." "Then let's get to work," Jake said. "We have a fleet to save." The second rescue went more smoothly than the first. The Discovery's crew had learned from their initial experience, and they worked with growing confidence. The Corvani scout ship captain even followed their maneuvering suggestions, making the extraction easier. By the time they approached the 3rd scout ship, word of their success had spread through the Corvani fleet. Admiral HFY himself was monitoring the rescue attempt, asking detailed questions about human techniques and equipment. When the final scout ship was pulled free, the communication channels buzzed with excited Corvani voices. Veltara translated the general mood for the human crew. "They're amazed," she reported through Amy. "Corvani captains are saying they've never seen such unconventional tactics work so effectively." Admiral HFY is asking to speak with you personally, Commander. Jake straightened his uniform and prepared to address the alien commander. 3 small ships rescued, 50 larger vessels still trapped. The real test was just beginning. Admiral HFY's voice came through the Discovery's speakers with a tone Jake had not heard before. The harsh commands were gone, replaced by something that sounded almost like respect. "Commander Harrison," Amy translated carefully, the Admiral, "says he was wrong to doubt human capabilities. He's asking if you believe your methods can save his entire fleet." Jake looked at the tactical display showing the remaining 50 Corvani ships. Most were much larger than the scout vessels they had already rescued. The biggest ones were trapped deeper in the gravitational field, where the forces were stronger and more dangerous. "Tell the Admiral that we're willing to try," Jake replied. "But we'll need his full cooperation and trust. This won't work if his captains don't follow our instructions exactly." The response came quickly. Admiral HFY was ready to commit his entire fleet to the human rescue plan. But first, he wanted to understand how such a small, primitive ship could accomplish what his powerful fleet could not. Dr. Bennett stepped forward. "Commander, may I explain the technical differences to him? I think he needs to understand why our approach works." Jake nodded, and Bennett began a detailed explanation that Amy translated sentence by sentence. The key difference, Bennett explained, was in how the 2 species approached problems. Corvani ships were designed to overpower obstacles with superior technology. Human ships were designed to work around obstacles using cleverness and adaptation. "The Corvani are like a strong man trying to break down a locked door," Bennett said. "We're like a locksmith who finds the right key." Admiral HFY asked many questions about human engineering philosophy and ship design. He seemed particularly interested in how human crews were trained to work together and adapt to changing situations. "He's impressed by our crew coordination," Amy reported. "He says Corvani officers are trained to follow orders without question, but your crew works together to solve problems as a team." Jake realized this was an opportunity to build trust between the 2 species. "Amy, asked the Admiral if he would allow some of his officers to work directly with our crew during the rescue operations. They could learn our methods while helping to save their own ships." The suggestion clearly surprised Admiral HFY. After a long pause, he agreed to send a small team of officers to the Discovery. Within an hour, a Corvani shuttle approached the human vessel. Jake met the alien officers in the Discovery's small shuttle bay. The Corvani were tall and lean, with gray skin and large eyes that seemed to take in every detail. They wore dark uniforms covered with rank insignia and military decorations. The leader introduced himself as Commander Kethalon, the Admiral's chief engineer. He was accompanied by 2 junior officers who would assist with the rescue operations. All 3 aliens carried translation devices that allowed them to speak directly with the humans. "Your ship is much smaller than I expected," Kethalon said in carefully pronounced English. "How do you accomplish so much with such limited resources?" Chief Engineer Pete Collins stepped forward to answer. "We focus on efficiency instead of raw power. Our systems are designed to work together smoothly rather than to overwhelm problems with brute force." Kethalon examined the Discovery's engine room with obvious interest. He asked detailed questions about human maintenance procedures, power distribution, and system redundancy. Collins patiently explained each system, showing how human engineers had learned to do more with less. "Your engineering approach is very different from ours," Kethalon admitted. "We build our ships to be individually powerful. You build yours to be collectively effective." Meanwhile, on the bridge, Dr. Bennett was working with one of the junior Corvani officers to plan the rescue sequence. The alien, who introduced herself as Sub-Commander Nithara, was a navigation specialist. She was amazed by the human approach to plotting courses through the gravitational field. You calculate trajectories using intuition as well as mathematics. She observed while watching Sam Parker work. Our navigators rely entirely on computer calculations. Sam grinned as he showed her his methods. Computers are great for exact calculations, but sometimes you need to feel your way through a problem. The gravitational field changes constantly, so we have to adapt our approach in real time. Lieutenant Amy Foster found herself working closely with the 3rd Corvani officer, a communications specialist named Tech Officer Vraldun. He was fascinated by how humans coordinated complex operations using simple voice commands and visual signals. Your communication methods seem chaotic, he said, but they achieve remarkable coordination. How do you maintain discipline without rigid protocols? Amy laughed. We trust each other to do our jobs. Everyone knows their role, but we're also free to make suggestions or ask questions. The best ideas can come from anyone, regardless of rank. The real test began when they attempted to rescue the first of the large Corvani vessels. The ship was a heavy cruiser, 10 times the size of the scout ships they had saved earlier. It was trapped deeper in the gravitational field, where the forces were much stronger. This is going to require everything we've learned, Jake announced to his mixed human Corvani bridge crew. Everyone needs to work together perfectly. The rescue attempt took 3 hours of careful maneuvering. The Discovery had to approach from multiple angles, using its tractor beam in short bursts to avoid overloading the systems. Pete Collins and Cephalon worked together in the engine room, with the alien engineer amazed by how humans could push their equipment beyond normal limits without breaking it. Your safety margins are much smaller than ours, Cephalon observed as he watched Collins redirect power from non-essential systems. We would never risk our equipment this way. Sometimes you have to take calculated risks to save lives, Collins replied. Our equipment is designed to handle temporary overloads as long as we're careful. On the bridge, Sam Parker and Nithara coordinated the complex navigation sequence. The Corvani officer quickly learned to appreciate the human pilot's instinctive feel for the gravitational currents. You're not just calculating the path, she said with growing excitement. You're dancing with the forces instead of fighting them. Exactly, Sam replied. The gravitational field isn't our enemy. It's just another part of the environment we have to work with. The rescue succeeded, but barely. The Discovery systems were pushed to their limits, and several warning lights flashed on the engineering displays. The saved Corvani cruiser moved to a safe distance, its crew sending grateful messages to their human rescuers. Admiral HFY's voice came over the communicators with clear emotion. Commander Harrison, my officers report that your methods are unlike anything they have ever seen. You treat impossible situations as puzzles to be solved, rather than enemies to be defeated. Jake felt proud of his crew's achievement, but he also knew they faced an even greater challenge. The Admiral's flagship was trapped in the most dangerous part of the gravitational field. Saving it would require everything they had learned, and more. Admiral, Jake replied, we've saved 4 of your ships, but your flagship is the real test. Are you ready to trust us completely? The response came without hesitation. Commander, you have earned the complete trust of the Corvani fleet. We will follow your instructions without question. Cephalon spoke up from the engineering station, where he had been working alongside Pete Collins. Commander Harrison, I believe we can modify our ship's systems to assist your rescue efforts. We've learned much from your engineering approaches. Jake looked around the bridge at his mixed crew of humans and aliens working together. The Corvani officers had adapted to human methods with surprising speed, while his own crew had learned to appreciate alien perspectives on familiar problems. Then let's save a flagship, Jake said with determination. All hands, prepare for the most difficult rescue we've ever attempted. The hardest part was yet to come, but Jake felt confident they could succeed. Human ingenuity and Corvani technology Working together might just be enough to save Admiral HFY and his mighty ship. Admiral HFY's flagship hung motionless in the heart of the gravitational maze, closer to the collapsed stars than any ship should survive. The massive vessel, nearly 2 kilometers long, was being slowly torn apart by forces that could crush planets. Its hull showed stress fractures, and several sections had already been sealed off to prevent total structural failure. Jake stared at the tactical display, studying every detail of the impossible rescue they were about to attempt. The flagship was trapped in a position where the gravitational forces pulled in 3 different directions at once. Any mistake could tear the ship apart or send it spinning into the collapsed stars. "Commander," Dr. Bennett said quietly, "the math doesn't look good. The gravitational stress at that location is beyond anything we've dealt with so far. Our tractor beam might not be strong enough to make a difference." Keflon looked up from the engineering station where he had been working with Pete Collins. "There may be a way to increase your tractor beam effectiveness. If we modify your systems using Corvani power coupling technology, we could boost your output by 30%. Is that safe?" Jake asked. Pete Collins wiped sweat from his forehead. "It's risky, Commander. We'd be pushing our equipment far beyond design limits. If something goes wrong, we could lose our tractor beam entirely. Or worse," Bennett added. "An overload could damage our engines and leave us trapped here too." Jake looked around the bridge at his crew and their Corvani allies. Everyone understood the risks, but no one suggested abandoning the rescue attempt. The alien officers had learned to appreciate human determination, while his own crew had grown to respect the Corvani and their proud military tradition. "How long would the modifications take?" Jake asked. 2 hours, Keflon replied. "Maybe less if your engineer Collins assists me. His understanding of your systems is remarkable." Sam Parker spoke up from the navigation station. "Commander, we don't have 2 hours. The Admiral's ship is being pulled deeper into the field. If we wait much longer, even a successful rescue won't save them." Jake felt the weight of command pressing down on him. 50 ships and thousands of lives depended on his decision. He could order the modifications and risk losing everything, or he could attempt the rescue with their current limited capabilities. "Do the modifications," he decided. "Sam, plot the best possible approach route. Amy, tell Admiral HFY what we're planning." The next 2 hours were the longest of Jake's life. Pete Collins and Keflon worked frantically in the engine room, combining human and Corvani technology in ways that had never been tried before. Sparks flew from control panels as alien power couplings were connected to human tractor beam generators. The bridge, Sam Parker worked with Nithara to calculate the perfect rescue trajectory. They had to account for the flagship's increasing damage, the changing gravitational forces, and the Discovery's modified systems. One small error could doom both ships. "Modifications complete," Pete Collins finally reported. "But Commander, I have to warn you again. These systems were never designed to handle this much power. We'll get 1 chance at this rescue, maybe 2 at most." "That's all we need," Jake replied with more confidence than he felt. The Discovery began its approach to the flagship's position. The ship shuddered and groaned as it entered the most dangerous part of the gravitational field. Warning lights flashed across every station, and the hull plates creaked under impossible stress. "Hull integrity down to 70%, Pete reported. "We're taking structural damage just being here." Through the view screen, Jake could see Admiral HFY's flagship growing larger as they approached. The massive ship was clearly dying, with entire sections dark and lifeless. But its bridge was still active, and Jake knew the Admiral was watching their approach with both hope and fear. "In position," Sam announced. "Ready to begin rescue sequence." "Tractor beam modifications are stable," Keflon added. "Power output is 35% above normal specifications." Jake took a deep breath. "Initiate tractor beam contact." The Discovery lurched as its modified systems engaged with the enormous flagship. Every light on the bridge flickered, and the sound of straining metal filled the air. The ship's computer system struggled to handle the massive power load. "Contact established," Pete Collins called out. "But the power drain is incredible. We can't maintain this for long." What followed was the most complex rescue maneuver ever attempted. The Discovery had to pull the flagship away from 3 different gravitational sources while avoiding the dangerous currents that could destroy both ships. Sam Parker's hands flew over his controls, making constant course corrections as the gravitational forces tried to tear them apart. "The flagship is responding," Nithara reported with excitement. "Admiral HFY's crew is following our guidance perfectly." For 40 minutes, the 2 ships fought their way through the gravitational maze. The Discovery's systems operated far beyond their safety limits, with Kefalon and Pete Collins redirecting power from every non-essential system. On the bridge, human and Corvani officers worked together with perfect coordination. "We're almost clear," Sam announced. "Just a few more minutes." That's when disaster struck. A massive surge in the gravitational field caught both ships by surprise. The Discovery's tractor beam overloaded, sending feedback through the entire power grid. Emergency lights replaced normal illumination, and half the bridge displays went dark. "Tractor beam is failing," Pete Collins shouted over the noise of failing systems. "We're losing our grip on the flagship." Jake watched in horror as Admiral HFY's ship began to drift back toward the collapsed stars. They had come so close to success, only to fail at the last moment, but Kefalon wasn't ready to give up. "There's one more option," he called out. "If we reverse the power flow and use the flagship's engines to help pull us both out, it might work." "That's insane," Dr. Bennett protested. "The power feedback could destroy both ships." "It's our only chance," Jake decided. "Do it." What happened next defied all engineering logic. The Discovery and the flagship became a single unit, their power systems linked in ways that should have been impossible. Human engineering flexibility combined with Corvani power technology created something neither species could have achieved. Alone, together, the 2 ships pulled themselves free from the gravitational field that had held them captive. When they finally reached safe space, both crews cheered with relief and exhaustion. Admiral HFY's voice came over the communications system, but this time he spoke in carefully practiced English instead of his own language. "Commander Harrison, the Corvani people owe you a debt that can never be repaid. You risked everything to save strangers, and you succeeded when all our technology failed." Jake felt overwhelmed by the emotions in the alien commander's voice. "Admiral, we were just doing what any decent species would do. You were in trouble, so we helped. That is exactly why this alliance will endure," Admiral HFY replied. "The Corvani have learned much from humanity today. We have learned that true strength comes not from superior weapons or advanced technology, but from the willingness to help others and the wisdom to work together." As the combined human Corvani fleet began its journey away from the Helix Nebula, Jake reflected on everything they had accomplished. They had saved 53 alien ships and thousands of lives. More importantly, they had formed the foundation for a lasting friendship between 2 very different species. The Corvani officers who had worked aboard the Discovery remained as permanent liaisons, eager to continue learning human methods and sharing their own knowledge. Admiral HFY announced that the Corvani Empire would formally recognize humanity as allies and equals, despite their technological differences. "Commander," Amy Foster said as they watched the stars ahead, "I'm receiving messages from across the galaxy. Word of our rescue is spreading fast. Other species want to meet the humans who helped the mighty Corvani fleet." Jake smiled. Humanity's reputation in the galaxy had just changed forever. They would be known not as conquerors or rivals, but as the species that always came to help when others were in need. It was exactly the reputation he hoped they deserved.